Welcome into a special Inside Carolina Live show. I'm Tommy Ashley. That's Don Callahan. That is not Pete Myers. That is not Michael Jordan. That is Greg Barnes, rightfully back on the beat at Inside Carolina. We are always sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt. Forewarning, it is after dark. It is way after dark.
We've been drinking.
Carolina. I have not done that. I do not do that, and that is not smart to say.
Okay.
Greg Barnes.
My bad.
Greg, talk some sense into Don right out of the gate. I feel like we need to have about $100 worth of Bojangles biscuits. Actually, that was the last time we were all together, if my memory serves.
I don't think people realize that the reason I came back is to try to get Don under control. It's such a tall ask for everybody involved. So.
Good luck with that. Don is not in a hospital bed. He's up in his man tower watching football, worrying about Drake May and the Patriots, who are currently killing the Giants. It is crazy how – I mean, this is relevant to our discussion, right, that we're going to have about Carolina football. The Patriots sucked last year and the year before. They go out and get a few players – the importance of a quarterback, Greg, and they are very, very good. Quarterback. That's all that matters. Your thoughts on Drake, your thoughts on the Carolina situation.
I mean, is he going to win the MVP?
I think so. If they go like 14-3 or whatever it is, I mean, he's got to, right?
Yeah, it's incredible what he's done. And I do think that with all the Belichick talk that we've had over the last couple of years now, it is a legitimate question about the impact that quarterbacks have. And we have seen that in Chapel Hill. We've seen that in the ACC. But I do think there has to be more involved. And clearly, look, everybody knows that what we saw on the field at North Carolina this season was nowhere near what it needs to be. But we also know that North Carolina had two NFL caliber quarterbacks in Sam Howell and Drake May. And yet, what were they able to win in college? You know, you got one kid's about, in contention for the NFL MVP 2 years after he was in college. And yet, in college, he played in one ACC championship game, and that's really about it. So, yes, quarterback is the most important position, no doubt about it. But there is other aspects that have to work out. And culture is a big part of it. You've got to be really good on the lines, and then the more talent you have at skill positions helps. But if you don't have a quarterback, none of that really matters.
Looking back, Drake won 9 games that year. That Wake Forest game that they won to clinch, I guess, a berth into the ACC championship. And that was it for that year. I can't even remember really a quality win that year when you think about it. And I should have researched it before. But, Don, I'll drag you into this conversation. I mean, a lot of people talk bad about NC State, and rightfully so if you're a Carolina fan. But NC State's beaten 4 teams this year with 8 wins or more.
Yeah.
Which is insane. And they're not good. But they must be pretty good to be able to do that. Let's talk about the culture aspect of it, Don. You're around a ton of high school recruits, the portal guys and all that. How much does culture come up these days in the NIL era especially? It seems like it might not matter as much, but tell us.
Yeah, I think it still matters. I think that, the type of kids that you're bringing in matters, and so it's hard unless you're doing your research. I mean, it's hard to determine whether what type of kid you're really getting in recruiting unless you really kind of truly recruit the player. Make sure you're going and visiting the school, talking to their counselors or teachers, their head football coach, have a good relationship with their head football coach, which is really important. I deal with high school coaches all the time. And I know certain high school coaches call me up and say, hey, I have a dude. I know that they're being legit. Some coaches call me up and say, hey, I have a dude. And I know they might be trying to sell me some crap. So I got to be careful. And that's really important. So I think actually recruiting these kids, and researching is really important to kind of figure out just what type of player they are, because that will bleed into your culture. The roster is basically double what you have in the NFL. So, a coach just can't have as much influence on the actual culture as you could as an NFL coach. You really have to bring in quality players because of just the mass amount of players on your roster.
Greg Slagle asked a question in the chat, and the way this show's going to work tonight is I have a list of questions off the Tar Pit premium message boards and the basketball premium message boards for Greg, for all of us, but mostly for Greg. And then I'll pull some out of the chat. This is All Things Carolina with Greg Barnes. This is like a special Greg Barnes show. Melinda in the chat, we'll cover the basketball game tomorrow. This is not an emergency podcast, but it is a relevant podcast given the largeness of the announcement earlier today that Greg Barnes is back on the Inside Carolina beat. I mean, I've known you forever, Greg, and I'm sitting there. I mean, I can't. Is it Mike? Is it really Michael Jordan that's joined us here? It feels like that.
Well, how great is it that we have a big picture of Greg's face on the message board all day long?
I know, really.
I need to leave and come back also.
And you won't get the young. How old were you in that
I won't
picture,
get the
Greg?
warm welcome. I might leave and not be welcome back.
Yep. That may have been a few years ago.
I saw that picture and I was like, wait a minute, I don't even know who that is.
Yeah.
And Don, they changed the locks on us, so let's make sure we don't get there. But back to the question Slagle asked, and Slagle's been around forever on these boards and great Inside Carolina listener, watcher, and contributor on these shows. What is the culture at Carolina right now? Greg, I don't think it just applies to the football program, but we'll talk about it in framing of the football program. What is the culture at Carolina right now, in your opinion?
Certainly evolving. And look, we had these conversations almost a year ago of that. There's a chance for this to go really well. There's a chance for it to go really poorly. It's probably going to be somewhere in between. And I think we can all agree it's probably closer to the going very poorly aspect of things. And it got really, really sketchy there, with the Clemson game and thereafter, and kind of the internal dynamics kind of coming to the surface. But I think there's been progress made. And one of the things about the culture part of it is with the ever-changing dynamics of the season that we're in with college sports, with NIL and with rev share. We know that North Carolina brought in 70 whatever guys this past year. In order for Belichick's intentions with the culture to stick, and for whatever growth there's been in that area, which I think there has been. I mean, for the most part, later in the year, Carolina played tougher. I don't think they have the talent to be able to capitalize on it necessarily. Certainly that it looked the way that people wanted them to look against NC State. But against Duke, against Wake, against Cal, against Stanford, you saw some of that toughness. You can kind of see the foundation for what Belichick would like, with better players, with maybe some better options at some of your coaching positions. But you kind of see parts of it. So the guys that you have that were actually important in that, I think Jordan Shipp's an obvious choice there, right? Melcart, Tyler Thompson, some of these guys who had really good years and they were able to step up and to shine and become leaders. Well, in theory, those are the guys that possess what you want within this cultural system. And so that's why I think retention is so very important. Yes, we can talk about the money being spent on the recruiting class that's going to sign the next couple of days. Yes, we can talk about the portal the beginning of January and the pieces that are needed there. But you've got to make sure that the guys that you're proud of, that you think represent the way you want this program to be, you got to make sure those guys stay around if they have eligibility remaining. And so I think that's a critical part of this puzzle. And that needs to be nailed down ASAP. And then once you have those pieces in place, as people come in, whether it's through the recruiting class or through the portal, they kind of have somebody to look at other than the coaching staff to say, oh, okay, this is what expected of us. This is how we need to be doing this and that. And this is how we need to be acting. This is how we need to greet one another. I mean, all these things are very important in terms of building culture. And so I think that's a very important key of it. And there's also the aspect of coaching retention. Now, I understand a lot of people want some changes in the coaching staff, and there will be. But you want a lot of the guys that you have faith in, that you think have done a good job, you want them to stay, because that's an important part of this, not just in the cultural part of things, but also with high school recruiting, as Don knows.
Yeah, and Don, we talk about, let me tee it up for you, because I'm like the machine at Drive Shack that puts the ball on the tee for you, right?
Okay.
If you get off the couch and come with us to play golf one day, I'll show you what I mean. But you talk about relationships all the time. And we've talked about how kind of the money is sort of balancing out a little bit. And then it's going back to the relationship aspect of all this. That speaks to what Greg's talking about, is to being able to build relationships. And you said just a second ago, actually recruiting guys, getting to know them, getting to know what makes them tick, and all those various things. It's giant to have continuity, not only on the roster, but on the coaching staff. But also you got to have a proof of concept that we've talked about a lot that we not necessarily have seen in the last 12 months. But anyway, Don, your take on what Greg talked about there, I think it's important.
Yeah, I agree with everything Greg said. And one of my questions is, everybody talked about the bringing in 70 new faces, which is actually I think 73 new faces this past season, I guess now, since it's kind of sort of over. We know that UNC is going to sign roughly, it's probably going to be in the low 40s. The portal class, I mean, we don't know exactly, but there is a chance it's going to be 2030, which is approaching at 70 again. If we're constantly having this turnover, I mean, if you're constantly adding 60 or 70 new bodies to the roster, that's what 2/3 of your roster every year. How can you instill the culture and a lot of the things that Greg was talking about, as far as like knowing how to approach things, knowing to make sure you show up on time for meetings, knowing what the expectations are, all that sort of stuff. How can you instill those things if you have to basically restart most of your roster every single year?
And Greg, therein lies the rub here. And that is why, to your point, and what I've talked about before, is the retention aspect of it. You have to have, I mean, I don't know how, but you have to have 25 to 30 guys that are solid year over year. Because if you're going to sign 40 people, if you're going to sign 30 people in the portal every year, that's all you have space for to keep, And we can talk about roster management here at some point on this. That's going to be insane trying to figure out the numbers. But, Greg, how do you do it? How does this coaching staff do it, especially when they're not versed well enough, I think is a big issue, in the college aspect of all this?
So I think there's 2 points that we need to make here, and one kind of falls in line with your specific question. The other more pressing concern is that the time runway for this coaching staff has been shortened dramatically. I think it's important that there was some expectation that North Carolina would be competitive this year. Not necessarily that they would be competitive to win the ACC or compete for a college football playoff, but not to be 4-8. Mm-hmm. Maybe be 8-4, and then that's a good stepping stone for next year. I think with how poorly everything has gone, now there's a legitimate question of, okay, what happens if they're not great next year?
Yeah.
I mean, if they go 7-5 next year, is there a chance of pulling the plug? I think probably so. And so the issue becomes, not only do you have all these new kids coming in, not only do you need a lot of new kids coming in from the portal, because you got to completely rebuild your offensive line. You got to completely rebuild your defensive backfield, at least in terms of your starters. Got to get a quarterback that can move the needle. And then there's some other positions that you've got to address. And then you have the retention component. So there's a lot of stuff that has to be done over the next month to make sure you can have a decent team next year. And so when Lombardi talks about, as he sent out that letter at the end of September, I thought the framework and the concept was right. That because they've lost so many guys over the years, because they really kind of arrived late last December, which they did. I mean, that's a legitimate statement. Now, did they handle it the way they needed to? No. But I think there was some self-reflection, and his point in that letter to donors was, okay, so basically what we're going to be doing this year is we're going to sign about 40 players. Essentially, that's going to be 2 recruiting classes in one, which suggests that that's not the number of kids they want to sign every single year. So if you follow that hypothetical along, maybe they sign 40 this week, but then next year, if everything goes according to plan, they only sign 25. And so what's happening is you have all these young players that are coming in, and in a matter of 2 or 3 years, well, now you're not having to sign 40 kids. Now you're not having to go into the portal and get all these kids to fill all these holes. You actually have an established roster where maybe you have 65, 70 kids who actually played for you last year. In theory, that's what you want. The problem is that's 3 or 4 years down the road. And they don't have 3 or 4 years to make this right. And that is the challenge of not only do you have to get your roster correct, you got to get the culture correct. You got to get the schemes correct so that when they kick off in Dublin, Ireland next August, they can be competitive and they can push double-digit wins, because I think that's really what's going to take for them to really feel like, not just them, the coaching staff, but for UNC's administration to say, okay, like it was a really rough start, but now we actually have some traction. Now we can actually see where this thing has some success moving forward.
Can I jump in real quick?
100%. Yeah, 100%.
So I agree with everything Greg's saying. I have a hard time believing it because, one, if you look at, or actually this is the main reason, if you look at every point since Belichick and Lombardi have taken office where it was a moment to add to the roster, they have added an extreme amount. You look in the fall or the winter portal window, they were among the most ads there. They added a ton prior to the February signing day, more than anybody else. They also added a ton in the spring, and now they're adding 40 plus in this class. It just makes it, to me, I believe it when I see it, when they're actually going to be conservative with their additions, because a lot of their actions have been, there have been moments where I've had sources tell me, okay, we're done. And then 3 more guys are offered. And no, we're done now. 2 more guys are offered. And it just seems like it's just this constant, basically kind of moving the goalposts when it comes to roster additions, which makes me wonder just kind of what's going on with all of that. So yes, that was just what I wanted to kind of add in there. Just I'll believe it when I see it, sort of thing, because I have no idea. You would think the smart thing to do is to add about 20-ish through the portal, if they're the right 20, so that you're keeping the roster turnover down. But I mean, I'm really kind of expecting it to be, closer to 30, just because of just how they've done things.
Don, have you seen any type of prototype develop in terms of what they're wanting at various positions as this has gone along?
At different moments I thought I have, but then things kind of change, and then just in general, to be honest, it usually, for me, it always takes me like a couple of cycles to get a feel for how a position, I'm talking about previously, a position coach, like what an offensive line coach might be looking for, or what a defensive line coach might be looking for. And we're still on really kind of the first cycle, so I haven't really got a huge grasp. But they they seem to want to have a bunch of different types of tight ends because that's what they've recruited. They definitely like the blocking tight ends. They seem to like to bring in the slot receiver types. A lot of this just seems like it's a lot of what has been done with the Patriots. As far as he was really big on slot receivers. Amendola and Welker, on and on and on. Obviously, what he did with the tight ends, those sort of things. But yeah, I don't have like a firm grasp, I would say, to answer your question.
Yeah, TBD there. Somebody asked, what's the schedule like next year? Well, they got TCU in Ireland. They got East Tennessee State at UConn, who's 9-3 this year. They'll get poached.
But they lost their coach and probably going to lose their entire roster.
Yeah, that's what I said. They'll get poached. You got Notre Dame at home. You got Louisville at home. You got Miami at home, State at home, Syracuse at home. They go to Clemson, to Duke, to Pitt, and to Virginia in the ACC. So, yes, it is much, much harder than it is this year. But as I said on another program earlier today, who knows what any roster is going to look like this time next year. We thought Clemson was going to be the toughest game on the schedule. Remember that discussion, Greg?
Yeah.
And they were for this Carolina team, but they weren't for everybody else. I mean, they were bad. So let me ask you this, Greg. What does keep it going next year? You mentioned 7-5. I think 7-5 may well be a best case scenario, but I also believe that's the floor next year. For this amount of money, this amount of investment that Carolina's made, I think 6-6 and it's over. Is 7-5 enough or beyond?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think the challenging part of this, number one, is that Carolina has not played a legitimate football schedule in years. Years. I mean, if you look at ESPN FPI, this year's strength of schedule was 83rd, which I think that's given the schedule a bit more credit than it deserves. But you go back to 2022 when you're talking about Carolina playing in the ACC championship game. I mean, that was 57th. And that's with playing Clemson in the ACC championship game and Oregon in the bowl game. So that wasn't a good schedule. And that's pretty much how it's been dating back to, a decade or so. So we've seen some bad years at Carolina against bad schedules. So it's time for the schedule to get better. It looks like next year it will be better. That doesn't mean it's going to be SEC caliber, but at least it'll be something competitive, which I think is important. And that's the good measure. Yeah, I think that the NC State game notwithstanding, that you saw enough growth in the second half of the season that if they can improve the offense, and that's clearly going to be a matter of offensive coordinator and finding a quarterback. Or maybe you get an offensive coordinator who can kind of unlock Gio Lopez and get him back to where he was last year, because he was a lot better quarterback at South Alabama than he has been at North Carolina. So whatever the formula is, you've got to get an offense together, and you've got to get some just more skilled pieces on defense. And if you can do that, you can have more success. I mean, Carolina was 1-3 in games decided by a touchdown or less this year. And some of those games they probably should have won. So maybe this is really a 6-6 team this year against a weak schedule. So you still have to see a significant step forward, but you've got to hit a lot of home runs. And I think that's the big thing. You need some of these kids in this recruiting class to pop. They have to. Granted, you've got a lot of them, so you assume a few of them will. You can't miss in the portal, especially on the offensive line. And then you need guys that you want to retain, to be able to retain them, and to have those guys really pop off again next year and have even better years. And all those things have to hit in your offensive coordinator hire. That's got to be a big pickup. Whatever quarterback you bring in has to at least elevate the room. I mean, what's that? 5 things right there I just laid out that all have to hit in order for this to have a chance of working next year. Can it be done? Yes, but it is a tall, tall task.
And it is North Carolina football after all. We're talking with Greg Barnes, Don Callahan here on just a special Inside Carolina All Things UNC with Greg, and Don, piles along as well. Just for planning purposes, for folks watching this that are always in these chats, we'll do a post game after Kentucky tomorrow night. Rob Harrington and me, probably at midnight. It is absolutely ridiculous that Carolina tips off at 9:35 on a basketball game on a Tuesday night. We'll be doing that. We'll be back here, the three of us, some form of the noon dish on Wednesday on signing day. Don't have a set time yet. We'll figure it out. A few big announcements there in recruiting that we want to be online for. So we'll be back doing that, but that'll be during the day. And also, I mentioned Johnny T-shirt earlier. It's Christmas time, sales, everything. Go to Johnny T-shirt, support them, take care of them. And also, Inside Carolina is having a sale right now. I believe it ends at midnight tonight, but you get half off your Inside Carolina premium subscription. Go to InsideCarolina.com and sign up. Let me ask you a question on the chat. Here you go. Carolina Flag Hunter on the message boards at me and at you, Greg. Aside from offensive coordinator and QB, what does Belichick need to do this offseason to really instill confidence in donors and the fan base that things are moving in the right direction? And then a second part that he asked later, what positives can Belichick take from this season and build upon for next season on or off the field? My one issue is with Belichick is he's no rah-rah guy. He's not going to get out and excite the fan base with words and all that. So, Greg, what does he have to do, or what can he do beside the big offensive coordinator, the big quarterback deal, to get folks back invested? If you look in the chat, there's not a lot of investment in the chat right now. What can Belichick do to change all that?
Well, I think the two things that are obvious, and he touched on them in his question, but you've got to nail the offensive coordinator role, and you've got to sign a high-profile quarterback. Those are first two things that you've got to be able to have secured by the time the portal closes on January 16th. That's critical. That at least gives you a little bit of breathing room. And I think the other part of it is, number one, everything that we've heard is, Belichick kind of behind the scenes has been willing to acknowledge that things should have been done differently. It's not, I think there's some perception that he's just kind of an ornery, stubborn guy who's not willing to change. And I don't know that that's the case. I don't think you have the success that he's had kind of being that way. That doesn't mean he doesn't think his way is right, but you have to be able to pivot. And I think the offensive coordinator hire will say a lot about that. If it's another mold of Freddie Kitchens, just kind of an NFL guy who's just a household name and kind of runs a very conservative offense that Belichick has been known to like, that's certainly not going to inspire a lot of confidence. But if it's a college quarterback who has had some pretty good offenses, maybe that piques people's interest. And then the other part of it too is Belichick has been willing and eager to meet with donors over the past year. And I know that may surprise some people, but he has, and he's willing to have some of these sessions and to answer questions and to talk about things. So I say that just to say kind of the persona that you see in front of the camera during interviews and those types of things is not necessarily what is happening behind the scenes. I don't know there's a dramatic shift by any means, but I do think that he has an understanding of what's kind of needed, and that should he choose, he'll be able to communicate what needs to happen, kind of what has happened, the lessons learned to the people with the money. And that's critical, because if he can't do that, then he's not going to have the money to kind of fund the roster the way that he wants to. But I just have a feeling that he's going to be able to get some of the money, at least most of the money that he needs for this next class coming in, to really give it a good effort next fall. Now, whether or not they're going to be able to sign the guys that they need to make that happen, that's another question. But I think he'll be able to do enough with the donor base to satisfy some of that. And then for the fan base in general, I mean, look, after what we've seen this year, I don't know that anybody's going to lock in until we actually see the 2026 season kickoff.
Don Callahan question. From top of the hill, I'd love to hear a conversation about a $10 million incoming freshman class. That's certainly a number. What do you think, Don Callahan? That's certainly a number.
Well, when I read it, and that was a great, I guess we'll call it report Greg put together. If you haven't read it, definitely read it. Some really good information that is nowhere else, in some hard numbers, which I thought was great. When I read it, surprised me. But then I started thinking about certain situations, things I have been told, and it makes sense. I mean, there have been, the number that someone told me that UNC has on the table for Vodney Cleveland, I just was like, what? And they said, which is what usually people say to you in these situations, that, hey, it's probably a little bit of an exaggeration, like a lot of these numbers. But even if it's, 3/4 of that number, it's pretty mind-blowing. But you got to think that for a kid to pry a kid away from Texas, it's going to take a lot. So it makes sense. And there's been other situations like that where North Carolina's flipped kids that typically would have no shot of flipping. And, good sources of mine are telling me, hey, yeah, they the other school wasn't willing to pay as much as North Carolina was willing to pay. So the numbers definitely made, I don't want to say made sense. It kind of sort of added up in my head for sure. I'm curious though, you might not know this, Greg. I'm kind of put you on the spot, but how much is there for the portal?
Yeah, that remains to be seen. It's a good question, and it's one that we're trying to get an answer to. But the fact that the portal is not going to be open until January 2nd gives you a little bit of leeway to grow some of that money. But kind of the initial conversations, if you go back to when Belichick was hired a year ago, and his contract is that $13 million of the rev share would be dedicated to football. And then the talk behind the scenes is that there's probably going to be about another 7 in NIL. So you get close to 20. But that was a year ago, and these numbers change. I mean, if you go to last year, I know Hubert Davis was asking for a certain amount, and then the amount that the basketball team actually spent was significantly higher than what the head coach had requested initially. So these numbers really move. Now, it was a unique situation this past year with the House settlement, and there being some leeway and some gaps there where you could actually probably spend more than what you can now. So that's relevant to the discussion too. But yeah, we'll just have to wait and see exactly how much they have. But we had the conversation on the message board earlier today, and some were saying, look, in theory, do you need 25 if you're spending 10 on the recruiting class, with 15 being for retention and guys in the portal? I mean, it seems like a fair number to me, which is just a tremendous amount of money. So I doubt it will be quite that high. But in terms of the needs that this team has, the more money, the better.
I hate having to kick people from the chat, but we can't have the spam over and over and over from the same stuff. Somebody thinks we're mouthpiece for Bill Belichick. That's unbelievable. Clearly haven't read much in the last 11 months, I don't think. Do y'all remember when, was it Ryan Day that said he had a $13 million roster and everybody clutched their pearls? Remember that? Wasn't that Ryan Day that said that, Greg?
A couple of years ago, yeah. But then the Ohio State athletic director came out after the championship game last year and said, yeah, our roster was $20 million.
Yeah.
I mean, the athletic director said that publicly. So, and look, I want to mention this as well, since we're on this topic. People were asking about the multi-year contracts. Yes, multi-year contracts are being signed, including at UNC. And I think it's important that as we talk about this, when we're talking about rev share, for example, if you have let's say you have a prospect and you sign him to $1 million contract for 2 years, and it's 500 the first year, 400 the second year, and then there's a $100,000 signing bonus involved. That's your $1 million contract. The way the rules work is whatever money is actually paid in the year in question is what goes toward the rev share cap. So in theory, you could have $1 million contract that's 2 years for a prospect, but only 600,000 of that would go against the cap in year one, and then year two would be 400. So there are some maneuverings that can take place in terms of how contracts are created to help. I don't want to say fudge the numbers because that's not accurate, but to be able to massage the numbers to make it fit within these rev share totals
Cook
as
the
well,
books.
NIL as well. Yeah.
So Greg, on that line of thought, somebody approached me in the parking lot in the Bowls lot one Saturday at a tailgate, and it was awesome this fall, having people come and chat with us and talk us up and all that. And they said, what about the clearinghouse and all these things where all these deals had to be cleared? And I basically said, yeah, that's nice in theory, but tell us about that aspect of it, because that used to be a thing. All these deals had to be cleared by a clearinghouse, and now you don't even hear about that.
It's still taking place. And I think they came out that first time and gave out a bunch of numbers and then had to immediately retract because some of the numbers were not correct. I think that's kind of slowed their public facing aspect of it. A couple things here. Number one, I really think the point of the clearinghouse was to deal with collectives, because collectives had gotten out of control. And while the collectives at North Carolina and a few other places were trying to do it by the book and do it fairly, at a lot of other schools, primarily a lot in the SEC, were basically just using it as a way to funnel money from boosters to players. And so the whole concept with the clearinghouse is that you're going to be able to address that. How do you address that? Any deal that's signed that's over $600 has to be looked at as a business deal. And in theory, it gets you back to, okay, now you actually have legitimate business dealings where, a car dealership wants to sign a player for $500,000 and he can drive a car and do a couple of commercials. That's what NIL was supposed to be originally. It was not supposed to be just paying players to play. And so I think the clearinghouse has helped in that regard. At least the early conversations that they talked about is a large majority of the actual business dealings contracts were being passed appropriately through the clearinghouse. It was all these collective deals where it's kind of sketchy about what the player was actually supposed to be doing to get the money. Those were all pretty much turned down. So collectives are still permitted. We thought they were going to be done away with initially, but they're still permitted. They just have a much higher threshold for what they have to prove in terms of the business aspect of things. But the actual NIL Go, which is the clearinghouse platform, that's still operating, and there's still a lot of opportunities. I do think the question that's going to come up, and has already come up, is when you have a legitimate business dealing, who's to say what fair market value is? And this is a conversation we've had before. But if you've got a kid on your team who's all world, and you've got a rich donor who owns, I don't know, a copy machine business, and he wants this kid to be the poster child for his new copiers, and he's going to pay him $3 million, who's Deloitte to say, that's not fair market value? Because in the free market idea, if you think somebody's worth X amount of dollars and you're willing to pay him for that, that's fair market value. And that's where I think a lot of the challenges are going to be, is that the collective concept is going to shift, and it's going to have to go back through these boosters who actually have businesses who want to be really tied in with the program and making sure kids get paid. And we're seeing some of that, in Texas. I mean, look what Texas Tech is doing. I mean, they were irrelevant a few years ago, and now in basketball and football, they have more money than they know what to do with.
Yeah, I mean, it is crazy about it. Let me ask a question in the chat. Both of you guys can answer this. Eric in the chat says, and I'm bouncing around, do you believe Belichick will hire an OC and turn the keys over to them? What's the likelihood of that happening, Mr. Callahan, in your opinion?
I can't get into Belichick's head, but what I will say is that defensive coaches have a reputation for wanting an offense very similar to the offense that you saw North Carolina run this season, which is an offense that is going to give the defense rest most of the time. I know 3 and outs. The NC State game, the first quarter, does not represent that, but they want an offense that's not going to score very quickly, not going to be no huddle, not going to be not going to be Larry Fedora's offense, basically. And so after seeing such an offense this past season, I wonder how much of that was by design, that they wanted an offense that was going to slow things down and limit the possessions. Because really, I can't remember what it is now, but I know at some point during the season, the amount of plays North Carolina had ran, both offense and defense, were significantly lower than most other schools, and I just feel like that's by design. So, to think that I don't want to never say never, because as Greg said, it does seem like Belichick behind the scenes has been open-minded, but I don't think that's something that Belichick would want to do as far as bring in somebody who is going to run their own offense without Belichick having kind of control, because the last thing he wants is for an offense is scoring a lot and then the defense just can't keep up, and then it looks bad on guess who's the coordinator of the defense, Belichick's son. Greg, I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, good punt. You handed it off to Greg. You threw a screen pass in the end zone there, and now Greg's stuck with everybody running around him. I said Carolina shortened the game intentionally, and it helped the defense look better. But Greg, your thoughts here on what potentially, how it could change if it changed on offense coordinator side of the ball for this team. I mean, if it were me and I was the head coach, I'd hire somebody, give it to them, and say, I don't want to see you. If you're not scoring 30 points a game, then we'll talk. But other than that, do what you got to do, Greg. Your thoughts here on potential hires and potential changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think Don's right. But look, if we go back to 2007, New England Patriots averaged 36.8 points per game in the NFL. It's a lot of points. 2010, 32.4, 2011, 32, 2012, 35. Belichick has had some high-scoring offenses before. I think, to Don's point, what you have to kind of figure out is what are the foundational elements in terms of the team concept that Belichick likes. He wants to run the ball. He's a defensive guy. So yeah, he's not going to put up with offenses that are careless, that turn the ball over because they get too risky and have too many 3 and outs, because that puts the defense at risk. But I think kind of beyond that, if you can have a legitimate rushing attack and you can benefit off that with a good quarterback who can take some shots down the field and take advantage of some schematic advantages, I think he's all for that. And I think we've seen that in his track record. Granted, it helps when you have Tom Brady and all the things that he could do for you. So I do think I don't think Belichick is committed to just running this 3 yards and cloud of dust type offense. I think those days are over. And I agree with you, Tommy, that I think he really had to lengthen the game and be very conservative just because the offense was not any good. And the way that you shorten the game, you give your defense some opportunities, maybe you get some turnovers, and you can be competitive. And we saw that for most of the second half of the season. what's going to be interesting though is what he brings in terms of how aggressive a play caller that person is. And to answer the question, is he going to hand over the reins? There's no chance in Hades that he's going to hand over the reins. No chance. But that doesn't mean it's going to be, this slow, methodical offense. I mean, it can have some life to it, but it's going to work within the concept of the team game that he wants, not what the offensive coordinator wants.
This is a question here that I think people don't understand what money does. Greg, I'll let you take it. Who wants to come work for a 74-year-old coach that's on shaky ground? There are 1.5 million reasons why somebody would do that. Is that an accurate statement, or is that a legitimate concern here for Carolina to find a quality offensive coordinator? Felt like it might have been last year, but what do you think this year?
Yeah, I mean, money plays a big role in that, but also, I mean, it's Bill Belichick. Is he past his prime? Well, yeah. Is he still one of the greatest coaches ever to do it? Yes. And so just having the opportunity to work with that guy, if you're serious about your coaching career, I think provides a lot of opportunity. And so I think there's a lot of reasons for people to want to work for Bill. Clearly, there's reasons not to work for him. I mean, he's not an easy guy to work for. He's tough on you. All those things matter. But yeah, there's plenty of reasons to work for Bill, not just financially related.
Yeah, exactly. It's way beyond just an old man coaching football there, I believe. Let me ask this question. I'm going to flip over to basketball in a minute because folks want some basketball talk. Starbury, who's a major contributor on the message boards, longtime person, says, my question is about quarterbacks. And Don, I'll give you this one first so you can't just agree with Greg. If you're hunting for a QB and you're bringing Lopez back, aren't you basically conceding your 2 freshman quarterbacks? It would seem you're either sacrificing them for expediency or assuming they have no chance of developing. Otherwise, it makes no sense. Herein lies the rub I've had all year with the way the quarterbacks have been used. I'll let you take this question, though, Don. Baker, Newkirk, freshman. We saw Newkirk the other day. We did not see Baker at all. We know they're hunting a quarterback in the portal.
Yeah, so I think that to look at it in a positive way, you could say that maybe you do like Baker and Newkirk, but you don't feel like they're ready because they are still true freshmen. And you can say they need at least one more year of development. And that's, I guess, the positive way. And to say that they're not ready to carry this team that we don't really know what exactly we have. We don't know what the offensive line is going to look like. The last thing we want to do is put some young kids out there who can't handle an offensive line that might be a little bit leaky. So yeah, that's the way I'm hoping. But the fact that Baker didn't get any snaps this entire season doesn't make me feel like they view it that way. But there's so much I don't understand with what they've done this season. So it's so hard for me to say, but I can't exactly argue against it strongly. That Starbury's point is valid. But I do think that there are a couple of explanations potentially for it because they are true freshmen who will be true sophomore or redshirt freshmen next season.
Greg, your thoughts here. I don't know if we've ever really talked about it on the game plan, and definitely not on the next level. And somebody took a shot on Gastonia in the chat here. Treading lightly over there, talking about Gas House. But Greg, your thoughts on the quarterback situation? And you're muted.
You're muted,
Greg. First one of the new.
I start talking about Gastonia, and I get muted.
You weren't muted. That was bleeped out.
That's right. That's right. The Fred Durst reference got me in trouble. Now you got me.
Quarterbacks.
All right, quarterbacks. So, in theory, number one, there's a lot of money in the quarterback room. I think that's important to say.
That's a good point.
Including with the assuming you get a decent player coming in the portal, that's a lot of money that you have tied up.
And Travis Berg is coming in.
Correct. So you got 5 guys there. And in theory, what you're looking for is to have 5 guys that you can put through spring ball and then again in training camp. And you can determine out of those 5 who you're paying a lot of money to, somebody is going to emerge and be your primary option. Now, you can't trade quarterbacks like you can at the NFL, which poses a problem and which sets up the likelihood of some kids transferring out next year if they don't this year. But at least conceptually, you're giving yourself decent options to find somebody that can have a lot more success. And I think that's really kind of the point of this whole conversation is that people see Gio and the numbers that he put up this year and say, the offense was terrible. How is he the best option? And I don't know that that's fair to Gio, because when you look at some of these results, I mean, it was the Duke game. I think Gio was pressured on 60% of his dropbacks. That's absurd. And he played pretty well in that game. So not that he was great by any stretch, because he wasn't, but there are a lot more issues throughout the offense than just the quarterback position. So maybe it was the case that Max Johnson had not proved that he was better than Gio. And maybe Belichick just has a very high threshold for what guys understand about how to run an offense, and which is why he didn't trust the young quarterbacks. I'm just spitballing here, but I can at least kind of see maybe how they were thinking, because I think Belichick was being honest when he said he thought Gio gave him the best chance to win. I mean, that's about all I got, because I do think that in theory you bring in somebody next year who's either an elite guy, or if he's not elite, he's on the Gio level. And if that's the case, then I think there's a real opportunity for Baker and Newkirk to make a move, both in spring ball and then again next summer.
I do find it ironic that the importance of spring ball, the only quarterback on that roster currently that went through spring ball didn't see a snap in 2025. And
that speaks to the issue, though, right? It's not just a matter about Baker. It's that the guy that they thought was going to be the guy at quarterback, after spring ball, they're like, uh-oh, he's not the guy. And so now you're talking about bringing in somebody to start who wasn't even here in spring ball, which just further complicates the matter.
Yeah, it is a dynamic, but it is 1A as far as things they need to do to excite the fan base. Is they got to have that quarterback room filled with somebody that brings excitement and can play, and pair it with an offensive coordinator that excites people. Otherwise, 2026 is dead on arrival, and if that happens, then it's never going to work. We're talking about Greg Barnes, Don Callahan. I feel like we need to talk a little basketball. Don, do you want to talk basketball, or do you want to go to bed?
I don't think you guys want me talking basketball.
I mean, it's up
to you. To be honest.
Stay here, then stick around.
I could stick around. I'll stick around and listen. But if I start talking basketball, then Inside Carolina will lose all of its credibility.
Yeah, I didn't say you were going to analyze or anything. You could just cheer in the back and say, "That's good answer, good answer."
All my answers are going to be, "I agree with Greg."
Yeah, you've done that already. I mean, you got the man's going to have a hurt back already with Don Callahan. Look, Greg, let's talk basketball for a minute here. Carolina plays Kentucky. Coast to coast crowd previewed Kentucky to Garrett's question in the chat yesterday, and it's an excellent listen. I cut up a clip from it directly about the Kentucky game. If it's on a YouTube channel, how important is this game for Hubert Davis, for this program against a Kentucky team that's going to be down a couple players, but are playing at home in Rupp, and we know how that environment's going to be. Carolina got the Kansas game. It's in the bank. The Michigan State game was ugly. How important is tomorrow night for Hubert Davis specifically, but this program in general?
I think it's a big opportunity. And for the reasons that you mentioned with so many guys being out. I mean, Diabate's out, Lowe's out, the big guy, Quinitz, he's hadn't played yet at all. And he's probably a lottery pick. So this is a very shorthanded Kentucky team. And we've seen that. I mean, they got embarrassed by Louisville. So I think it's a tremendous opportunity to get a win on paper, on the road, that'll look better than probably what it is come into the year, just because of those injuries. And the difficulty here for Hubert is the fact that, as he's in his fifth year, it's very easy to make all of these non-conference games critically important to him, because in recent years they have been. But I put out an article today about the initial net rankings, and I think they're important because what we've seen in ACC play is different than what we've seen in the last few years. I mean, the ACC has a pulse. And the reason that's important is, whereas last year, Carolina had to win all those non-conference games, or else they're going to have to beat Duke to have any type of Q1 opportunities. Well, they're going to have a handful of them in ACC play now, because there's some pretty good teams in the ACC, and even the mid-tier teams are not atrocious. They'll be competitive, and they won't be just Q3, Q4 anymore. They'll be Q2 and occasional Q1. So I say that because, it's an important opportunity, and you need to win as many of these non-conference high-profile games just to help kind of solidify where your program is, kind of dismiss the notion that, hey, okay, maybe this is another bubble North Carolina team. So you win this game and you're saying, okay, well, this is a good Carolina team. They're not going to be on the bubble. They're going to be able to compete. But I think with the ACC being deeper and better this year, that's going to help stabilize the need for some of these big wins. So it's not as important as maybe as it would have been last year or the year before, but it still is a big opportunity.
Don, I do have a question for you related to basketball. How important is it? How important is a basketball game to recruiting weekends when there's no football games? I mean, is that still a big deal for the?
Yeah,
I know they bring them there.
Well, it's an easy way, an easier sell. If you're going to invite a recruit to a weekend and you just say, "Hey, come hang out with the coaches," and eat lunch with them, as opposed to, "Hey, come watch UNC and Duke," or even if it's just UNC and Georgia Tech. You get to come hang out with the coaches and watch the basketball game is a lot easier of a sell than it is just a regular junior day. And really, I mean, it's a huge asset for North Carolina that a lot of other programs just don't have, because there's, you guys know, I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know. As far as the fan support for the basketball program and just the atmosphere at a UNC basketball game compared to some other places is just very different.
That's interesting. I mean, guys have gotten, those are some high dollar tickets, those Duke tickets that those football recruits getting. It's an interesting mix. I just wonder, how does having a good basketball team help football recruiting? You know what I mean? Is that a big deal to guys, or is it basically done just to see the atmosphere, just to see the fan support? Of course, fan support depends on how good the team is too as well. So it all blends together there. So Timmy Ann in the chat said we need to let Don go to bed. He has a baby. She's got kids in college and just
Don's just watching the end of this, hoping that Travion Henderson gets to carry the ball for a little bit. I just need 2 more points.
Oh my God, fantasy man! I sold out on my fantasy. Josh Allen has killed me this year.
Don, my son is in 5 leagues. And the funniest thing about it is that he'll have games where he's got the same player, one player he's pulling for to get points, but then he needs him not to get points for another league.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of like, what's going on here? How are you actually enjoying this? I'm not sure that he is, but
no, Yeah, you really have to kind of scale back because it makes it unenjoyable if you have multiple teams. Because I've dealt with that before. So
my kid won like $600 betting on yesterday on college football games.
Wow.
He bet the Sunday game, the noon games, like a 5-leg parlay, the 3:30 games, a 5 or 6 leg parlay, and then the 7 o'clock games of one of those parlays, and he hit on every one of them.
Wow.
Bet $15 total, won $560.
That'll keep him coming back.
Exactly. Yeah. I was like, put it in my bank account, and it didn't happen. Greg, somebody in the chat said this, and I think it's a relative question, and we've talked about it on the football side, and I can't find it. It said, Hubert and Belichick have dug themselves into a hole that they can't NIL their way out of it. I think Hubert Davis has shown that you can do it quicker on the basketball side, right?
For sure.
And people look at the roster they have now, which is an expensive roster, but Caleb Wilson specifically and Henry Vesar are certainly top-level finds and good grabs for Hubert Davis there. Anything left before I ask you a fun couple questions, Greg? Anything you want to get out? You want to tell us what you'll be doing, what we'll be doing on these shows with you going forward, and how glad you are to be back on the beat at Inside Carolina?
Well, just to address that question you just had about kind of the holes that have been dug, as Don mentioned earlier, and as we've discussed before, but eventually the money is all going to pretty much level out. Yes, you're going to have your Ohio States on the football side of things and the Kentuckys on the basketball side that maybe go above and beyond with what they can spend. But for the most part, it's going to level out. And it's going to get back to relationships are important, right? That's the key part of it. But then you also have to be able to recruit to whatever system you have. You have to be able to evaluate, and then you have to be able to coach them up. And this is all basic coaching. It doesn't matter what sport you're in, but all those things matter. So I do think there was a couple years, this past few years, where it was all about the money. But the good coaches still were able to coach their guys up. And that's why Kirby Smart's, you had a top 5 team for however many years in a row. That type of thing is important. And so for Hubert and for Belichick, it's determining what your identity is going to be, determining what your schemes are going to be, recruiting to those schemes, making sure you evaluate well, and then coaching them up. And if you can do that with the amount of money that they have available, they can both have a tremendous amount of success. But you got to get all those things lined up in a row, which is easier said than done. And I think Hubert's kind of a good example of, when he has the pieces in place that he wants, we've seen him have some pretty good teams. But when those pieces don't fall in line and he doesn't have the center that he wants or maybe the guard that he needs, then things tend to struggle. So you got to make sure that you're recruiting the right pieces and knowing what you get. And if you do that, you can win.
Yeah, it's like when you go shopping for clothes, they got to look good, and it's got the whole outfit, not this one because it's cold in the bonus room, but your whole outfit, like Don Callahan's outfit, Philadelphia Phillies shirt, old man sweatpants, and some torn up socks. It works. It works for Don Callahan. That's his vibe. That's his fit. Timmy, and yes, Greg is back on the Inside Carolina beat. Question, Greg, from JRS Hill 2011 on the message boards. How much did Greg's golf game improve in the few years he stepped back from being the lead reporter at IC and today?
Nobody will believe this, but my game got significantly worse. I'll be serious.
That is, maybe we have a chance if we can get you on the golf course. Which PGA player? My favorite Greg Barnes story, and I've told it before, is I can't remember where we played, Greg, and I felt like you played bad, and you felt like you played bad, and you're like, I said, what'd you shoot? You're like, yeah, 74.
That was at the Thistle down at the beach. Yeah,
that's when I knew that That's when I knew we were on a different level. What PGA player, past or present, would you compare Bill Belichick's career arc to, Greg? Jeez.
Oh, geez.
I should have given you that one beforehand.
Yeah.
I knew nothing about golf, but it'd have to be somebody who had a sustained winnings and then kind of came back when he probably shouldn't have.
I'm gonna say because just the local flair, and people can look into this and figure it out. But I think Dustin Johnson's probably the best choice.
That's a good one. Doesn't really do much early. Is good early and then gets really hot and then sort of fades into Bolivian. And yes, I understand the typo there. Let's see. I was trying to look for more chats. What's your favorite golf course, Greg?
That I've played?
That you've played. Let's go favorite that you've played ever and favorite around here.
Spyglass Hill is a favorite that I've played.
You like that better than Pebble?
Course-wise, yes. Pebble was better than I expected, just because Pebble's known for having 6 through 11 as the prettiest stretch in golf, and then 18 is actually more than that. I was really impressed with the front 9. But Spyglass from number 1 through 18 is just phenomenal.
What'd you shoot at both?
I was low 80s at both. So I didn't play. And granted, Pebble, it was foggy all day long. But I played pretty well. Spyglass is tough. That's one of the – I don't know if it's the toughest course the pros play every year on tour because they play it at the Pebble Beach Invitational, the Pro-Am. But it's always up there. It's a brutal track from the back. And then around here, if you can ever swing it, if you can somehow find somebody that can get you on it, Grandfather Mountain, especially in the fall, that's just a beautiful track of land. And that's my favorite around here. It's been a number of years since I've actually played it. So
that's pretty cool. Look, this is a good comparison to Belichick, Koepka. That fits as well. Good pull, Slagle.
Mm-hmm.
Don, what's your favorite golf course?
We have this mini golf around the corner.
You're hilarious.
Hey,
I will pay good NIL money to see Don come play golf with us.
We do need to go play Knights Play, Don. That's not far from us.
I don't. That's another thing that you don't want Don to do is play golf with you.
I don't think they allow cargo shorts on the golf course.
Nice
yeah, they absolutely.
Par 3 under the lights. What could be better?
Greg, what's your favorite course right around in this area? And when I say this area, that is, we'll say the Triangle area, 100-mile radius from Raleigh. No, 50-mile radius from Raleigh.
Non-Pinehurst, I guess.
Non-Pinehurst.
I'm partial to Mill Creek. I think Mill Creek's a very good track. And then I actually like Duke. I know people probably won't like hear me say that, but I think Lonnie Poole's too difficult. I think it's a tough college player course. And I have not played the new Finley. The previous version I was not a massive fan of, but I'm anxious to get out and play the new Finley.
You're talking about when they just redid it in the last year or so?
Yeah, they opened it up back in, so it's been a year ago in October, so I haven't been out there in the past year.
Yep, there you go. We need to get it done. UK, Bart Watts, he's a regular. Carolina, Kentucky predictions before we go. Who you got?
I've got North Carolina winning this one just because Kentucky's got so many missing pieces. And I think it's going to be a high-scoring affair, so I'll say Carolina wins 86-81.
Yeah, I'll go with Carolina too. I do not know what a score will be, but I agree with you that I think it'll be high scoring. Maybe 81-75. We'll go with that. We'll see who's closer. Anyway, anything left for you, Don, other than bed?
Just I started that book.
Oh, yeah, I gave you a book.
Brady versus
Belichick.
Or Belichick versus Brady, whatever. Yeah, started that on chapter
good,
3. Started over the weekend. So it's It's pretty good. The writer hops around a little bit. I don't mind hopping around so much from chapter to chapter, but within the chapters, and so but I like it. I mean, it's definitely well sourced, has a lot of quotes from different people, including Brady Sr., which is really interesting. So just his takes on Belichick were kind of interesting so far, and just so it's been good so far. So I appreciate the recommendation.
Absolutely. Brady Sr. is not a fan of
No.
Bill Belichick.
No, he's not
at all. Not at all. Kind of reminds me of another former pro quarterback daddy or the dad. Anyway, I'm getting out of here. Greg, it's been a pleasure. We'll talk to Greg a lot more as the days and weeks go by here on the Inside Carolina podcast. And, of course, Don and the three of us, like I said, on Wednesday for a signing day. It's going to be a fun time at Inside Carolina. A lot going on, a lot of news. Greg's at the forefront of it, as you well know if you watch these religiously. Garrett, we might do a golf pod sometimes. We'll see how that one goes. If we're allowed to do it, we will have a golf portion of the show. Pick us up a sponsor, and I'm all for it. Greg, Don, Johnny T-shirt, Inside Carolina. Thanks, boys. Oh, and the fans. 300 plus fans at midnight almost. We'll see you tomorrow night after Carolina, Kentucky.